I think that's really interesting, but I'm going to like just touch in on the concept of like factions that one, s- like one school of thought came from software and then design thinking came from physical product design. Do you feel like that, I don't know, like upend some of our logic about design thinking in the software space or,
Well, absolutely. There's still
yeah,
people that are trying to differentiate between product design and UX design as a discipline. And just speaking to you, the reality is I've never really acknowledged UX design as a discipline. I accept it now because there's so many people that put it in their titles and they need to because of their organization and it's what the organization is looking for. And I'd say a lot of people utilize it as a way to just find job and network. So I don't really have a problem with it because it's just taken on a life. But if I was to look at sort of my origins, I came out back in 98, people wanted brochures. They thought like the web was a brochure. And so you thought about it like in Cork, where you're trying to do layouts and try and connect things. And I took a process early on from that page book of design thinking, trying to figure out, okay, well, this is much more complex. This is like connected things, and I'm building a product for someone that is all digital, but they don't really know what's going on. And I have to think about this thing holistically as how is this helping someone? What are they trying to do with it? And so I probably suffered through 5 or 6 years, and most people in that time trying to just educate and help people understand how the technology facilitated the product. And I made tons of mistakes going through that process, but I always thought of it as a product experience. I need to make this thing, had to embody just logins and screens. And so there was physical uh, things that people typed in and did, and then they got stuff from the system. And UX, I think, started emerging as a term in 2004, 5, 6 as a more sort of recognized word that people were trying to describe what this was. And a lot of the product design stuff still hung on. And you see a lot more product designers now as a label of defining what they're doing than, say, they did earlier in that 2000. But I hung on to that idea that I was making or building something with the idea that whatever I made had a benefit and was useful to people and created something that was desirable and they wanted to keep using it over and over again, which the end result of that is you would call, I guess, a great experience, right? Can you design that? I always thought you design the system, you design the things, you design the patterns, you design the things that create those experiences. But are you designing the experience? Everyone has their own unique experiences. So I took maybe a contrarian view of this. And I've had arguments with people over the years. Peter Merholt, I've talked about this and whatnot, because at the time, Adaptive Path was one of the precursors of the sort of movement around UX. And but I don't know. At this stage, 20 years later, I don't know if I have a bone in to pick, but I advocate for methods that I think are sound. And how we label the top picture, I don't overly get stressed about or try to correct people or try to put people in their place.
yeah. And I think it's irrelevant. Like it's because a good design practice at a company is going to be evaluating user experience as part of their practice. And so like it's going to happen no matter what the name of the design team is in the org. And I agree with you. It's okay. If I want a UX job at this company I admire, I just switch my LinkedIn titles. Like it doesn't matter. Like titles don't matter. What matters is the practice, right? That you apply to a problem space. And at the end of the day, it's breaking down the problem, abstracting it into its core component part, identifying like the object model and all that stuff. And then iterating and reviewing and just going through the cycle of developing taste and
Yeah.
developing a palette in the problem space that you're assigned to at this. That's basically it. I like what you said. It's just like, product design is innovation rather than this assembly line thing. It's just more about, okay, how can we make
Yeah.
things twice as fast, more approachable, more affordable, et cetera, and then solve those problems. The titles don't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that a lot of this is about building great things with teams and trying to facilitate those relationships. Ultimately, it's impossible. I don't want to say it's impossible. You can be a one-man shop and build things. There's a lot of examples of people who have done amazing things and have created the disciplines and all the skills required to do that at a high level is really, and so you need small teams of people that can do that. You don't need large teams, but you do need cross discipline of what I'd call T-shaped people who have vertical expertise, but horizontal understanding of problem spaces that can really tackle a problem with a group of people and facilitate decision making. And design as a tool, as a method, is great for that because it's helping people in system thinking. If you looked at the differences maybe in what I would call the origins of product design and product, it was much closer, I think, to engineering problems where UX, maybe the beginning people had more engineering background, but if you look at a lot of people, they don't have engineering backgrounds. And I still believe that system thinking, engineers, it's a core component of it is you have to think in system, one thing, two things, three things, 5,000 things. And if you think about experience, you can't control all 5,000 results, but you can sort of think about the system at the 5 or 10 core parts of that system. And if I was to argue what's the most important part of being successful in thinking about design problems, it's having system thinkers on your team that can really discombobulate all the variables that come into play when you're trying to create something and reduce, quite frankly, reduce those to the point where, the outputs of all those systems are more successful than not, right? And this is why we have all these ICPs and trying to align towards customer segments is because it's impossible to meet everyone's needs, right? We have to figure out and bring our solution to groups of people that have very specific problems. And so your product isn't meant to try to find all the people and bring them into your product. It's quite the opposite. This is where, if you look at, say, pre-industrial revolution, I made something and then I went on the streets and I sold it. And if I did something good, I made money. If not, then I tweaked it because I needed to make money and I went back to my shop and then did it again. And so if you look at today's building and product and thinking of that, the layers in between what the customer needs and what they're looking for and their wants and that sort of shop moment or that like street moment, there's like so many layers in between. So if you think about a designer now, a lot of their job is just system designing the system that creates the product, right? Not necessarily even the product because they're so far removed away from the actual delivery and what's in there. So designers now have to think about both of those parts, the market and understanding how to build something with a group of people and facilitate all those systems and teams, as well as make the actual product. Now that's where product management roles have gone in to organize that or try to make sense of it. But I still argue that designers at a top level should be able to facilitate both of those pieces and be able to drive the change necessary in an org to produce that product in the systems that produce that product. So
because it's a competency. Like you can't just
it is a competency.
You can't give a I'm going to quote Thomas, I think Tom Wilson or something. I'm going to quote Thomas, that LinkedIn conversation we had, which is you can't give an uncreative person a linear thinker a framework and they're going to suddenly become more creative. And that's like the bad product managers is that the barrier of entry to get into product management is actually pretty low. Like you could laterally move into product management pretty easily, which is something you can't do. You can't just move into a design role. Like,
well, you can. There's a lot of bad design out there too.
Yeah, and it's like from a transferable discipline like graphic design, but you're not going to see some person from like marketing like just come in and be like, oh, like I'm going to be designing software systems now. You just don't see it that often. But product management like has a bunch of randos getting into it, and a lot of them came business or like business admin backgrounds, where they were trained in linear thinking processes like financial models and balance sheets and stuff that's really important when you're operating or owning a business, but not really great when you're making something new.
Well, there is a place for it, but how much that voice comes through, that really becomes how much are you leaning on a team to build or make something, and where does that linear skill set or that critical thinking support what you're trying to do?